I always thought reality was a fixed thing, a solid floor beneath your feet, a sky above your head, the ticking of the clock on the wall. I believed in the ordinary, the explainable, the world as a series of causes and effects. I was a scientist, after all, a man of data and logic, not stories. But that was before the day I met the man who walked out of time. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of day that slips by unnoticed, gray and unremarkable. I was working late in the lab, running tests on a new batch of samples. The building was mostly empty, the hum of the fluorescent lights the only company. I remember glancing at the clock, 11:47 p.m., and thinking I should go home, get some sleep, try again in the morning. But something kept me there, a sense of unfinished business, or maybe just the inertia of routine. I was packing up my things when I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps on the glass door, echoing down the empty hallway. I frowned, glancing at the security monitor. The camera feed was grainy, but I could make out a figure standing just outside the door, a man, tall and thin, wearing a dark coat and a hat pulled low over his eyes that I hesitated. The building was locked after hours, and visitors were rare, especially this late. But something about the man's posture, the way he stood so still, made me uneasy. I pressed the intercom button. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice crackling through the speaker. The man looked up, and for a moment, I thought I saw something strange in his eyes, a flicker of confusion, or maybe fear. He leaned closer to the glass. "I need to speak with Dr. Marcus Hale," he said, his voice muffled but clear. "That's me," I replied, my curiosity piqued. "What's this about?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to appear behind him. "It's important," he said. "Please, I don't have much time." Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door and let him in. He stepped inside, moving with a kind of cautious urgency, as if every second mattered. Up close, I could see that he was older than I'd thought, late 50s, maybe, with deep lines etched into his face and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of secrets. He didn't offer his name, and I didn't ask. Instead, he sat down across from me at the cluttered lab table, his hands trembling slightly as he reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small, battered notebook and slid it across the table. "I need you to read this," he said. "All of it, and then you'll understand." I opened the notebook, flipping through pages filled with cramped, hurried handwriting. The entries were dated, each one marked with a time and place. At first, they seemed like the ramblings of a paranoid mind, references to lost hours, missing days, strange coincidences. But as I read, a pattern began to emerge, a thread weaving through the chaos. The man watched me in silence, his gaze never leaving my face. When I finished, I looked up, my mind reeling. This can't be real," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a sad, weary smile. "That's what I thought too. But reality doesn't care what we believe." He began to tell me his story, and as he spoke, the world I thought I knew began to unravel. His name was David, though he never told me his last name. He'd been a history teacher, living a quiet life in a small town upstate. He had a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage, a dog. Ordinary, unremarkable, until the day everything changed. It started with a dream, he said, a vivid, unsettling dream of walking through a city he'd never seen before. The buildings were tall and strange, the streets empty and silent. He wandered for what felt like hours, searching for something he couldn't name. When he woke, the dream clung to him like a shadow, impossible to shake. He tried to ignore it, chalking it up to stress or an overactive imagination. But the dreams kept coming, night after night, each one more detailed than the last. He began to recognize landmarks, street names, faces in the crowd. It was as if he were living a second life, one that existed only in his sleep. Then, one morning, He woke to find that the world had changed, that it was subtle at first. A book on his nightstand that he didn't remember buying. A photograph on the wall that showed his family at a place they'd never visited. He shrugged it off, blaming faulty memory or a practical joke. But the changes kept coming, small inconsistencies piling up until they became impossible to ignore. His wife called him by a nickname he'd never heard before. His son's favorite color was suddenly green instead of blue. The dog barked at him as if he were a stranger. He tried to laugh it off, to convince himself that he was imagining things. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. The dreams grew more intense, bleeding into his waking life. He would catch glimpses of the city in the corner of his eye, hear snatches of conversation in a language he didn't understand. He began to lose time, hours, sometimes whole days, vanishing without a trace. He went to doctors, therapists, anyone who might have an answer. They ran tests, prescribed medication, told him it was stress, anxiety, dissociation. But nothing helped. The world continued to shift around him, reality slipping through his fingers like sand. Then, one night, he woke to find himself standing in the middle of the city from his dreams. He was dressed in clothes he didn't recognize, his pockets filled with unfamiliar objects, a set of keys, a wallet with a name that wasn't his, a folded map marked with strange symbols. The air was cold and sharp, the sky a deep, unnatural shade of blue. He wandered the empty streets, calling out for help, but no one answered. The city was silent, abandoned, as if it had been waiting for him. He walked for hours, following the map through twisting alleys and crumbling buildings. At the center of the city, he found a door, a massive, ornate door set into the side of a building that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. He hesitated, fear warring with curiosity, but something compelled him to open the door. Inside, he found a room filled with mirrors, hundreds of them, each one reflecting a different version of himself. Some were older, some younger, some dressed in clothes he'd never worn. In one, he saw himself as a child. In another, as an old man with a long, white beard. He stared into the mirrors, searching for answers, but found only more questions. As he watched, the reflections began to move on their own, independent of his actions. They smiled, frowned, wept, screamed. Some reached out, pressing their hands against the glass as if trying to escape. He turned to leave, but the door was gone. The room began to spin, the mirrors warping and twisting until he felt himself falling, tumbling through a void of light and sound. When he woke, he was back in his own bed. But nothing was the same. David paused, his hands shaking as he reached for a glass of water. I sat in stunned silence, struggling to process what I'd just heard. "I know how it sounds," he said, his voice barely audible. "I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't lived it." He told me that after that night, the changes became more pronounced. People he'd known for years no longer recognized him. His house was filled with objects he didn't remember buying. His own reflection seemed subtly wrong. As if he were looking at a stranger, he began to keep the notebook, documenting every inconsistency, every lost hour, every dream. The entries grew more frantic, the handwriting more erratic, as he tried to make sense of the impossible. He became obsessed with the city from his dreams, convinced that it held the key to his predicament. He spent hours researching, scouring maps and historical records, searching for any trace of the place. But it didn't exist, not in any reality he could find. His family grew concerned, then frightened. They begged him to get help, to let go of his obsession. But he couldn't. The city haunted him, calling to him in his sleep, pulling him deeper into its labyrinthine streets. One night, he vanished and he woke in a hospital, surrounded by strangers. They told him he'd been found wandering the streets, disoriented and confused. He had no memory of how he'd gotten there, No idea how much time had passed. When he returned home, everything was different. His wife was gone. His children were older. The house filled with unfamiliar furniture. The world had shifted again, leaving him adrift in a reality that wasn't his own. He tried to adapt, to play the part of the man he was supposed to be. But the dreams continued, the city growing more vivid, more real. He began to see the mirrors everywhere, in windows, in puddles, in the eyes of strangers. Each one showed a different version of himself, trapped and desperate. He became convinced that he was slipping between realities, each one slightly different from the last. He was a ghost in his own life, a stranger in his own skin. He came to me, he said, because he'd heard about my work, my research into consciousness, memory, and the nature of reality. He hoped I could help him, or at least bear witness to his story. I wanted to help. I wanted to believe that there was a rational explanation, a way to fix what was broken. But as I listened to him, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet, the familiar world growing strange and uncertain. Over the next few weeks, David became a fixture in my life. He would appear at odd hours, sometimes in the middle of the night, always with new stories, new evidence of the shifting reality around him. He brought photographs that changed from one day to the next, objects that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, memories that contradicted the world around him. I began to notice small inconsistencies in my own life, a book out of place, a conversation I didn't remember having, a scar on my hand that hadn't been there before. At first, I dismissed them as coincidence, the tricks of a tired mind. But as the days passed, the anomalies grew harder to ignore. One night, I dreamed of the city. I walked its empty streets, the air thick with silence. I found the door, the room of mirrors, the endless reflections. I saw myself, over and over, each version trapped behind the glass, reaching out in silent desperation. When I woke, David was gone. I searched for him, but he had vanished without a trace. His notebook remained, filled with pages of frantic scrawl, maps of the city, diagrams of the mirrors. I pored over them, searching for answers, but found only more questions. The world feels different now, less solid, less certain. I catch glimpses of the city in the corner of my eye, hear echoes of voices in the silence. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see a stranger staring back. I don't know what happened to David. I don't know if he ever found his way home, or if he's still wandering the endless streets of that impossible city. But I do know this: reality is not as fixed as we believe. The world is full of cracks, of glitches, of places where the fabric of existence wears thin, and sometimes, if you're not careful, you can fall through. The first time I met Lila, she was sitting alone at the back of the library, her face half hidden behind a curtain of dark hair, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the battered cover of a book. She looked up as I approached, her eyes wide and unblinking, as if she'd been waiting for me all along. That I was there to close up for the night, to do my rounds and make sure the last of the students had drifted out into the cold November evening. But something about her made me pause. She looked out of place, not just in the library, but in the world itself, like a photograph that had been pasted into the wrong album. "Are you all right?" I asked, my voice echoing in the cavernous silence. She nodded, but didn't speak. I noticed the book in her lap. A Brief History of Time, its pages dog-eared and stained, the spine cracked from years of use. She was maybe 16, 17 at most, but there was something ancient in her gaze, a weight that didn't belong to someone so young. "You know we're closing soon," I said gently. She looked up at me, her eyes searching my face as if trying to remember something important. "Do you ever feel like you've already lived a day before it happens?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. That I hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "Sometimes," I admitted, thinking of déjà vu, of dreams that seemed to bleed into waking life. Why do you ask? She closed the book, hugging it to her chest. Because I remember tomorrow, she said. And it's not the first time. Her name was Lila, and she was a regular at the library, though I'd never noticed her before that night. She came in every afternoon, always alone, always with a different book. She never checked them out, just read them in the same corner, her back to the wall, her eyes darting to the windows as if expecting something or someone to appear. After that first conversation, I found myself drawn to her, curious about the strange things she said, the way she seemed to exist slightly out of sync with the world around her. I started bringing her tea, sitting with her in the quiet hours before closing, listening as she told me her story. She said it started when she was 12, the day her mother died. She remembered waking up that morning with a sense of dread, a certainty that something terrible was about to happen. She tried to warn her mother, begged her not to leave the house, but her mother just smiled and kissed her forehead, promising to be home before dinner. She never came back. The police said it was an accident, a patch of black ice, a car that skidded off the road. But Lila knew it was more than that. She'd seen it in her dreams, felt it in her bones. She remembered the sound of the phone ringing, the way her father's face crumpled as he listened to the voice on the other end. She remembered the funeral, the cold wind, the way the world seemed to tilt on its axis. But what she remembered most was the day after, the day she woke up and realized she'd already lived it first. She thought she was losing her mind. She would wake up each morning with memories of things that hadn't happened yet, conversations, arguments, accidents. She tried to ignore them, to convince herself they were just dreams, but the memories persisted, growing more vivid, more insistent. She began to write them down, filling notebooks with lists of events, predictions, warnings. Sometimes she was right. A teacher would call on her in class, a friend would trip and fall, a storm would roll in just as she'd remembered. Other times, things would change, a conversation would go differently, a choice would be made, and the future she remembered would slip away, replaced by something new. It was like living in a maze, she said, each day a branching path, each choice a fork in the road. She could see the possibilities, the ways the world might unfold, but she could never be sure which path she was on until it was too late. She tried to use her memories to help people, to prevent accidents, to warn her friends of danger. But no one believed her. They called her a liar, a freak, a witch. Her father sent her to therapists, doctors, priests. They gave her pills, prayers, diagnoses. None of it helped. She learned to keep her memories to herself, to hide the truth behind a mask of normalcy. But the memories never stopped. If anything, they grew stronger, more detailed, more impossible to ignore. One night, as the library emptied and the world outside faded into darkness, Lila told me about the first time she tried to change the future. She was 14, sitting in math class, when she remembered a fire. She saw it in her mind, a flash of heat, the smell of smoke, the sound of sirens. She remembered running through the halls, her classmates screaming, the flames licking at the ceiling. She tried to warn her teacher, but he laughed it off, told her to stop daydreaming. She tried to pull the fire alarm, but the principal caught her, threatened to suspend her for causing a panic. That afternoon, the fire never happened. Instead, a boy in her class, Eli, collapsed during gym, his heart stopping without warning. She remembered the look on his face, the way the world seemed to freeze as the teachers rushed to his side. She remembered the funeral, the grief, the sense of helplessness. She realized then that the future wasn't fixed, that every choice, every action, sent ripples through the world, changing the outcome in ways she couldn't predict. She could remember tomorrow, but tomorrow could always change. She became obsessed with the idea of fate, of destiny, of whether the future was something that could be altered or if it was already written in stone. She read everything she could find, books on physics, philosophy, religion. She filled notebook after notebook with theories, diagrams, timelines. But the more she tried to understand, the less sense it made. The world was a puzzle with missing pieces, a story that kept rewriting itself. I listened to her, night after night, as she unraveled her memories, her fears, her hopes. I watched as she grew more withdrawn, more haunted, her eyes ringed with shadows, her hands trembling as she turned the pages of her books. One evening, as the first snow of winter drifted past the windows, she handed me a notebook, its cover worn and stained with ink. "Read this," she said. "Maybe you'll understand." I opened it, scanning the pages. Each one was dated, filled with lists of events, predictions, warnings. Some were crossed out, others circled in red. There were notes in the margins, questions, doubts, regrets. I flipped to the last page, where she'd written a single sentence. "Tomorrow, I will disappear." I looked up at her, my heart pounding. "What does this mean?" She smiled, a sad, weary smile. "I've seen it," she said, "over and over. No matter what I do, no matter how I try to change it, tomorrow is the day I vanish." I tried to protest, to tell her that the future wasn't set, that she could choose a different path. But she shook her head. "I've tried," she whispered. "I've tried every way I can think of, but some things are inevitable." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the notebook clutched in my hands. I thought about Lila, about her memories, about the way the world seemed to bend around her. I wondered if she was right, if the future was a river that could be diverted, or if it always found its way back to the sea. The next day, I went to the library early, hoping to find her, to convince her to stay, to change the future she remembered. But she never came. I searched for her, called her name, checked every corner of the building. I asked the other librarians, the security guards, the students. No one had seen her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. That I called the number she'd given me, but it was disconnected. I went to the address she'd written in her notebook, but the house was empty, the windows boarded up, the yard overgrown with weeds. That I filed a missing person report, but the police found nothing. No records, no family, no trace of her existence. It was as if she had never been there at all. Weeks passed, then months. The world moved on, the library filled with new faces, new stories. But I couldn't forget Lila, couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, somewhere, remembering tomorrow. Sometimes, late at night, I would find her notebook on my desk, open to a new page, filled with fresh predictions, new warnings. I would read them, searching for clues, for a way to bring her back. But the future always slipped through my fingers, changing before I could grasp it. I began to notice small changes in my own life. A book out of place, a conversation I didn't remember having, a scar on my hand that hadn't been there before. At first, I dismissed them as coincidence, the tricks of a tired mind. But as the days passed, the anomalies grew harder to ignore. One night, I dreamed of Lila. She was standing in the library, her back to the wall, her eyes fixed on the window. She turned to me, her face pale and drawn, her hands trembling. "Do you remember tomorrow?" she asked. I tried to answer, but the words caught in my throat. She smiled, a sad, knowing smile, and faded into the darkness. When I woke, the notebook was gone. That I don't know what happened to Lila. I don't know if she ever found a way to change her fate, or if she's still out there, trapped in a loop of memory and possibility. But I do know this: the future is not as fixed as we believe. The world is full of cracks, of glitches, of places where time folds in on itself. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you can hear tomorrow whispering in your ear. I grew up in a neighborhood where nothing ever changed. The houses were old, the trees older, and the people oldest of all. It was the kind of place where you could walk the same block 1,000 times and never see anything new. The mailboxes were always the same. The cracks in the sidewalk never shifted, and the streetlights flickered in the same tired rhythm every night. It was a place that felt immune to time, as if the world outside might change, but our little corner would always stay the same. That's why I noticed the house right away. It was a Tuesday morning in late spring, the kind of day when the air is thick with the promise of rain. I was walking my dog, Murphy, down Maple Lane, just like I did every morning. Murphy was old and slow, his nose pressed to the ground, his tail wagging at every familiar scent. I was half awake, my mind drifting, when I saw it, a house at the end of the block, where there had never been a house before. It was a 2-story Victorian, painted a deep, almost iridescent blue, with white trim and a wraparound porch. The windows were tall and narrow, the glass so clean it seemed to shimmer. The yard was perfectly manicured, the grass a shade of green I'd never seen in real life, the flower beds bursting with blooms that looked almost too perfect to be real. I stopped in my tracks, staring. Murphy tugged at the leash, eager to keep moving, but I couldn't take my eyes off the house. I tried to remember what had been there before, a vacant lot, I thought, overgrown with weeds and wildflowers. I'd walked past it every day for years, and I was certain there had never been a house there. Not yesterday, not ever. I looked around, half expecting someone else to notice, but the street was empty. The other houses looked the same as always, their paint peeling, their porches sagging, their yards cluttered with toys and garden tools. But the blue house stood out, pristine and untouched, as if it had been dropped there from another world. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe I'd just never noticed it before. Maybe it had always been there, hidden behind the trees or lost in the fog of routine. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I dreamed of the house. I was standing on the porch, my hand pressed to the cool, smooth wood of the railing. The door was open, and a warm, golden light spilled out onto the steps. I could hear music playing inside, soft, haunting, the notes drifting through the air like smoke. I stepped inside, and the world shifted. The rooms were filled with shadows, the walls lined with mirrors that reflected not my face, but 1,000 versions of myself, some older, some younger, some dressed in clothes I'd never owned. I wandered from room to room, searching for something I couldn't name, the music growing louder, more insistent that I woke with a start, my heart pounding. The image of the house burned into my mind. The next morning, I walked Murphy down Maple Lane again, half expecting the house to be gone. But it was still there, as perfect and out of place as ever. This time, I saw a woman standing on the porch, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her dress a shade of blue that matched the house. She waved as I passed, her smile polite but distant. I hesitated, then waved back. "Good morning," I called. She nodded, her eyes lingering on me for a moment before she turned and disappeared inside. That I kept walking, my mind racing. I wanted to ask her about the house, to find out when it had been built, who lived there, why I'd never seen it before. But something held me back, a sense of unease, a feeling that I was trespassing on something I didn't understand. Over the next few days, I watched the house from a distance. I saw the woman on the porch, sometimes alone, sometimes with a man and a little girl. They moved with a kind of practiced grace, their movements synchronized, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. I never saw them leave the house, never saw a car in the driveway, never heard the sound of voices or laughter. The other neighbors didn't seem to notice the house at all. When I asked Mrs. Jenkins, who'd lived on the block for 50 years, she just frowned and shook her head. "There's no house at the end of Maple Lane," she said. Just that old vacant lot. Always has been. I tried to argue, to describe the house in detail, but she just patted my hand and told me I was working too hard, that I needed to get more sleep. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe the house was a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. But every morning, it was there, as real and solid as the ground beneath my feet. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the streetlights flickered to life, I saw the little girl standing at the edge of the yard. She was maybe 8 or 9, her hair a tangle of curls, her dress white and spotless. She was staring at Murphy, her eyes wide and unblinking. Murphy trotted over, tail wagging, and the girl knelt to pet him. I approached slowly, unsure of what to say. "Hi," I said, forcing a smile. "I haven't seen you around before. Do you live here?" She nodded, her fingers tangled in Murphy's fur. "We just moved in," she said, her voice soft and musical that I glanced at the house, its windows glowing with warm light. "It's a beautiful house," I said. "Did you build it?" She shook her head. "It was always here. You just didn't see it before." I frowned, unsettled by her words. "What do you mean?" She looked up at me, her eyes impossibly blue. "Sometimes things hide," she said. "Sometimes they wait until you're ready to see them." Before I could ask her anything else, the woman appeared on the porch, calling her name. The girl stood, gave Murphy one last pat, and ran back to the house. The woman watched me for a moment, her expression unreadable, then closed the door behind her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the girl's words echoing in my mind. Sometimes things hide. Sometimes they wait until you're ready to see them. I got up, pulled on my coat, and walked down Maple Lane. The street was silent, the air thick with the scent of rain. The house was dark, its windows shuttered, the porch empty. I stood at the edge of the yard, my heart pounding, and tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I took a step forward, then another, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. The grass was soft beneath my feet, the air humming with electricity. I reached the porch, my hand trembling as I reached for the door that I opened before I could touch it. The woman stood in the doorway, her face pale in the moonlight. She didn't speak, just stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But curiosity won out, and I stepped inside. The air was warm and sweet, filled with the scent of flowers and something else, something old and familiar. The rooms were just as I dreamed, filled with shadows and mirrors, the walls lined with photographs of people I didn't recognize. The woman led me to the living room, where the man and the little girl sat by the fire. They looked up as I entered, their faces calm, their eyes shining with a strange, inner light. "Welcome," the man said, his voice deep and soothing. "We've been waiting for you." I sat down, my mind racing with questions. "Who are you?" I asked. "How did you get here? Why does no one else see your house?" The man smiled, his gaze steady. "We're travelers," he said. "We move from place to place, from time to time. Our house goes with us. Most people can't see it. Only those who are looking for something they've lost." I frowned, confused. "I'm not looking for anything." The woman shook her head. "Everyone is looking for something," she said, "even if they don't know it." The little girl reached out, taking my hand in hers. Her skin was cool, her grip surprisingly strong. "Do you want to see?" she asked. Before I could answer, the room began to spin. The walls melted away, the floor vanished beneath my feet. I was falling, tumbling through darkness, the world dissolving into a blur of light and sound. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in a different room, a room filled with memories. Everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of my life, photographs, toys, books, letters. I saw my childhood bedroom, my mother's kitchen, the park where I'd learned to ride a bike. I saw faces I hadn't thought of in years, heard voices long since silenced by time. I wandered from room to room, each one a different memory, a different moment. Some were happy, others tinged with regret. I saw the day my father left, the night my dog died, the first time I fell in love. I saw myself at every age, every stage, every fork in the road. I realized then that the house was a kind of mirror, reflecting not just my past, but all the paths I might have taken, all the lives I might have lived. I found the little girl waiting for me in the last room, her eyes filled with understanding. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. She smiled. "Because you forgot," she said. "You forgot who you are, where you came from. The house helps you remember." I knelt beside her, tears streaming down my face. "What happens now?" She took my hand, her grip gentle. "You can stay if you want, or you can go back. The choice is yours." I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. I thought of the life I'd lived, the choices I'd made, the things I'd lost and found along the way. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on the porch, the sun rising over Maple Lane. The house was gone, the yard empty, the grass wild and overgrown. Murphy tugged at the leash, eager to keep moving. I looked around, half expecting to see the woman, the man, the little girl. But there was nothing, just the quiet street, the familiar houses, the world unchanged. I walked home, my mind spinning with questions. Had I dreamed it all? Had the house ever really been there? I never saw the house again. The lot at the end of Maple Lane remained empty, the grass growing taller with each passing year. The neighbors never spoke of it, never mentioned the family or the little girl. But sometimes, when the light is just right, I catch a glimpse of blue at the edge of my vision, a flash of color, a memory of something lost and found. And I remember the house that wasn't there yesterday. I never believed in fate or destiny or any of those things people say to comfort themselves when the world doesn't make sense. I believed in hard work, in choices, in the idea that you make your own luck. I was a paramedic for 12 years, and in that time, I saw enough chaos and heartbreak to know that life is random, brutal, and rarely fair. But all of that changed the night I saw myself die. It was a Friday in late October, the kind of night when the city feels restless, the air thick with the promise of rain. My partner, Jamie, and I were working the late shift, weaving through traffic in our battered ambulance, the radio crackling with calls. We'd already had a busy night, 2 overdoses, a car accident, a heart attack. I was tired, my nerves frayed, but there was a strange energy in the air, a sense that something was about to happen. We were parked outside a convenience store, grabbing coffee and trying to catch our breath, when the call came in, a possible jumper, downtown, top of the old parking garage on 7th. Jamie groaned, tossing her cup in the trash. "Why is it always the garage?" she muttered, climbing into the driver's seat that I shrugged, buckling my seatbelt. "It's the highest spot in the neighborhood. People go where they think they can't be stopped." We sped through the city, sirens wailing, the streets blurring past in a wash of neon and rain. When we arrived, the police were already there, their cars blocking the entrance, their radios buzzing with static. A small crowd had gathered, faces pale in the flickering light. We took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart pounding, the air growing colder with each step. At the top, I saw him, a man standing on the edge, his back to us, his coat billowing in the wind. He looked so still, so calm, as if he were just admiring the view. The officers tried to talk him down, their voices gentle, coaxing. Jamie and I hung back, waiting, watching, ready to move if he changed his mind. I studied his posture, the way he held himself, the tension in his shoulders. Something about him felt familiar, but I couldn't place it. Then he turned around, and the world stopped that he looked just like me. Not just a passing resemblance, not just the same hair or build. He was me, down to the scar above my eyebrow, the crooked nose, the faded tattoo on his wrist. He wore my clothes, my shoes, even the same watch I'd gotten for my birthday last year. His eyes met mine, and I felt a jolt of recognition so deep it made me dizzy. He smiled, a sad, knowing smile, and stepped off the edge that I ran to the railing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked down, expecting to see a broken body on the pavement below, but there was nothing, no sign of him, no blood, no impact. The alley was empty, the rain washing the concrete clean. The police searched the area, but found nothing. No witnesses, no security footage, no explanation. Jamie tried to comfort me, but I could barely hear her. My mind was spinning, my hands shaking. I kept seeing his face, my face, falling through the darkness. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a coincidence, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But the memory was too vivid, too real. The next day, I called in sick. I spent hours searching online, looking for stories of doppelgangers, parallel universes, glitches in the Matrix. I found message boards filled with people who claimed to have seen themselves, to have met their doubles in dreams or on the street. Most of the stories were vague, half-remembered, but a few sent chills down my spine. I started to notice small changes in my own life, my keys in the wrong place, a scar on my hand that hadn't been there before, a song on the radio I'd never heard but somehow knew all the words to. I tried to ignore them, to focus on the routine of work, the comfort of the familiar. But the feeling of unease grew stronger with each passing day. A week later, I was called to another scene, a car accident on the highway, a single vehicle wrapped around a tree. The driver was dead when we arrived, his face hidden by blood and broken glass. As I leaned in to check for a pulse, I caught a glimpse of his wrist, a faded tattoo, just like mine. I stumbled back, my heart racing. Jamie gave me a strange look, but I couldn't explain what I'd seen. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. I began to keep a journal, documenting every strange occurrence, every moment that felt out of place. The entries grew more frantic, the handwriting more erratic. As I tried to make sense of the impossible point one night, I dreamed I was standing on the edge of the parking garage, looking down at the city below. I felt the wind on my face, the weight of the world pressing down on me. I turned around and saw myself standing behind me, watching with sad, tired eyes. "Why are you here?" I asked. He smiled. "To remind you." "Of what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, merging with me, and I woke with a start, my heart pounding. The next morning, I found a note on my nightstand, written in my own handwriting. "Don't forget who you are." I had no memory of writing it. The days blurred together, each one more surreal than the last. I saw my double everywhere, in the reflection of a shop window, in the face of a stranger on the subway, in the dreams that haunted my sleep. Sometimes he would smile, sometimes he would weep, but he was always there, a silent shadow at the edge of my vision. I started to question everything, my memories, my identity, my very existence. Was I the original, or just another copy, doomed to repeat the same mistakes? Was I living my own life, or just following a script written by someone else? I tried to talk to Jamie about it, but she just looked at me with concern, her eyes filled with worry. "You need to get some rest," she said. "You're burning out." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just tired, my mind playing tricks on me. But the feeling of dread wouldn't go away. One night, I was called to a fire in an old apartment building. The smoke was thick, the heat intense, the air filled with the sound of sirens and shouting. We rushed inside, searching for survivors, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. In one of the bedrooms, I found a man lying on the floor, his face hidden by soot and blood. I knelt beside him, checking for a pulse, and froze. It was me. His eyes fluttered open, and he looked at me with a mixture of fear and relief. "Help me," he whispered, his voice weak. I tried to lift him, but he was too heavy, his body limp and unresponsive. The flames closed in, the heat growing unbearable. I heard Jamie calling my name, her voice distant and panicked that I looked down at my double, his eyes pleading. "Don't leave me," he begged. I hesitated, torn between saving him and saving myself. In the end, I ran, stumbling through the smoke, my lungs burning. I made it out just as the building collapsed, the flames devouring everything in their path. The next day, I found a burn on my arm, a scar that hadn't been there before that I started to avoid mirrors, afraid of what I might see. I stopped answering the phone, stopped going out with friends. I became a ghost in my own life, haunted by the memory of the man who looked just like me. One night, I woke to find my double standing at the foot of my bed, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling that he shook his head. "You're not supposed to be here." "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "This isn't your life. You took someone else's place." I tried to protest, to tell him he was wrong, but the words caught in my throat. He reached out, his hand cold against my cheek. "Remember," he whispered. "Remember who you are." I woke with a start, my heart racing, my sheets soaked with sweat. The next day, I quit my job. I packed a bag and left the city, driving until the streets gave way to open fields and endless sky. I found a small motel on the edge of nowhere, paid for a week in cash, and tried to disappear. But the past followed me, relentless and unyielding. I saw my double in every shadow, heard his voice in every silence. I started to wonder if I was the double, if I was the one who didn't belong. One night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. I studied every line, every scar, every imperfection. I tried to remember who I was, where I'd come from, what I'd lost along the way. As I watched, my reflection began to change. His eyes grew darker, his smile twisted into a sneer. He reached out, pressing his hand against the glass. "Let me in," he whispered. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. The mirror shattered, shards of glass scattering across the floor. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I'm the original or just another copy, lost in a world of endless possibilities. I don't know if the man I saw die was me, or if I'm the one who's already dead. All I know is that reality is not as fixed as we believe. The world is full of cracks, of glitches, of places where the fabric of existence wears thin. And sometimes, if you look too closely, you might see yourself staring back. I was never supposed to find the town. I was just passing through, a stranger with a suitcase and a map, looking for a shortcut between two places I barely cared about. I'd been driving for hours, the highway stretching out behind me like a ribbon of regret, the radio crackling with static. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold, when I saw the sign, "Welcome to Marrow Creek. Population 1-204. ****. I almost missed it. The sign was old, the paint peeling, the numbers faded. The road narrowed, the trees pressed in close, and suddenly I was there, rolling down Main Street, past shuttered shops and empty sidewalks, the world gone quiet except for the hum of my engine. I slowed to a crawl, peering through the windshield. The town looked like something out of a postcard, frozen in time. The storefronts were neat and tidy, the windows gleaming, the awnings striped in cheerful colors. There was a diner on the corner, a barber shop, a hardware store. A church steeple rose above the rooftops, its bell silent in the gathering dusk. But there was something wrong. The streets were empty, the lights in the windows flickering but never steady. I saw no cars, no people, not even a stray dog. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of rain and something else, something old and sweet, like rotting fruit. I pulled over in front of the diner, killed the engine, and stepped out into the silence. My footsteps echoed on the pavement, too loud in the stillness. I tried the door, half expecting it to be locked, but it swung open with a cheerful jingle. Inside, the diner was immaculate. The booths were upholstered in red vinyl. The tables gleamed. The counter was lined with chrome stools. A jukebox stood in the corner, its lights blinking in time to a song I couldn't hear. Behind the counter, a woman in a crisp white uniform smiled at me, her eyes bright and empty. "Evening, stranger," she said, her voice warm but distant. "What can I get you?" I hesitated, glancing around. The place was empty except for me and the woman. "Just coffee." "Thanks," I said, sliding onto a stool. She poured a cup, the coffee steaming and black. I took a sip, the taste bitter and familiar. For a moment, I almost forgot where I was. "Passing through?" she asked, wiping the counter with a spotless rag. "Yeah," I said. "Just needed a break. Place seems quiet." She smiled, her eyes never leaving mine. "It's always quiet in Marrow Creek." I tried to make small talk, but she answered every question with the same polite, empty smile. I asked about the town, the people, the history. She told me nothing, her words slipping away like water through my fingers. After a while, I finished my coffee, left a few bills on the counter, and stepped back into the night. I wandered down Main Street, the silence pressing in on me. The shops were closed, the windows dark. I tried the doors, but they were all locked, the glass cold beneath my fingers. I peered inside, saw mannequins dressed in outdated clothes, shelves lined with goods that looked untouched for years. That I found a motel at the edge of town, its neon sign buzzing in the darkness. The lobby was empty, the desk unattended. A bell sat on the counter, and when I rang it, a man appeared from the back room, his face pale and expressionless. "Room for one?" I asked. That he nodded, sliding a key across the counter. "Room 12, he said. "End of the hall." I took the key, my hand trembling. The hallway was long and narrow, the carpet threadbare, the walls lined with faded photographs. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and found a room that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. The bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn, the air thick with dust. That I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wallpaper, the pattern repeating over and over, never quite matching up. I tried to call home, but my phone had no signal. I turned on the TV, but every channel was static. That I lay down, closed my eyes, and tried to sleep. But the silence was too deep, too complete. I felt like I was being watched, like the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. In the morning, I woke to the sound of voices outside my window. I pulled back the curtain and saw people on the street, men and women, children and old folks, all moving in slow, deliberate patterns. They walked in circles, their faces blank, their eyes unfocused. I dressed quickly, grabbed my bag, and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky overcast. I walked down Main Street, watching the townspeople as they went about their routines. They nodded as I passed, their smiles polite but empty. That I tried to talk to them, to ask for directions, but their answers were always the same, vague, repetitive, as if they were reading from a script. I asked about the date, the year, the name of the mayor. They all gave different answers, their voices overlapping, their words dissolving into nonsense. That I started to feel dizzy, my head spinning. I ducked into the diner, hoping for a moment of clarity. The woman behind the counter greeted me with the same smile, the same empty eyes. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded, sinking onto a stool. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Where is everyone?" She poured a cup, her hands steady. "Everyone's here," she said. "We're all here." I looked around, saw the booths filled with people, their faces blurred, their bodies flickering in and out of focus. I blinked, and the diner was empty again. I stumbled outside, the world spinning. The sky was darker now, the clouds heavy and low. I tried to leave, to find the road out of town, but every street led me back to Main Street, to the same diner, the same motel, the same faces. That I realized then that I was trapped. Days passed, or maybe weeks. Time lost all meaning in Marrow Creek. The sun rose and set. The people moved through their routines, but nothing ever changed. I tried to keep track of the days, marking them on the motel notepad, but the numbers blurred, the pages filled with scribbles and nonsense. I searched for a way out, but every road led me back to the center of town. I tried to call for help, but the phones were dead, the internet a blank screen. I wrote letters, left notes, shouted into the empty streets, but no one answered. That I started to forget things, my name, my past, the reason I'd come to Marrow Creek. The memories slipped away, replaced by the routines of the town. I woke, ate breakfast at the diner, wandered the streets, slept in the motel. Over and over, the same day, the same faces, the same empty smiles. That I began to notice small changes, a crack in the sidewalk that hadn't been there before, a new flower in the window of the florist, a child's laughter echoing down an alley. The changes were subtle, almost imperceptible, but they grew more frequent with each passing day. That I started to remember things that hadn't happened, conversations with strangers, dreams of places I'd never been, memories of a life that wasn't mine. I saw myself in the faces of the townspeople, my features reflected in their eyes, my voice echoing in their words. I realized then that Marrow Creek was a place of forgetting, a town that erased itself and everyone in it, over and over, until nothing was left but the routines, the patterns, the empty smiles. One night, I dreamed of leaving. I walked down Main Street, the sky filled with stars, the air humming with possibility. I found the edge of town, the place where the road disappeared into darkness. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, and the world dissolved around me. That I woke in my motel room, the sheets tangled around my legs, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I looked at the clock, but the numbers made no sense, spinning and shifting before my eyes. I packed my bag, determined to try again. I walked down Main Street, past the diner, the barber shop, the church. The townspeople watched me, their eyes wide and unblinking. At the edge of town, I found the sign, "Welcome to Marrow Creek. Population 1204, ****. I stepped past it, into the darkness, and the world shifted. That I was driving down the highway, the sun setting behind me, the radio crackling with static. I glanced at the map, searching for a shortcut, and saw the sign, "Welcome to Marrow Creek. Population 1204, ****. I almost missed it. That I don't know how long I've been here. I don't know if I'll ever leave. The days blur together, the memories slip away, the routines repeat. Sometimes I remember who I am, where I came from, but the memories fade, replaced by the empty smiles of the townspeople. I write this now, hoping that someone will find it, that someone will remember. Marrow Creek is a place of forgetting, a glitch in the fabric of reality, a town that erases itself and everyone in it, over and over, forever. If you find yourself on the road at sunset, if you see the sign, "Welcome to Marrow Creek," keep driving. Don't stop. Don't look back. Because once you enter, you may never leave.